Started.
Yeah, let's kick it off. Thanks, Frida. So, hi, everyone, and welcome to Break the Fundraising Mold, Tips to Transform Your Donor Messaging. This is an interactive workshop that will be teaching you a new fundraising messaging framework that you can employ immediately to create more compelling messages. So whether you're working on a capital campaign, an annual fund, or any other fundraising effort, the fundamentals of developing powerful messages have one thing in common. They begin with powerful strategies. So by the end of this webinar, you'll lead with the knowledge and the confidence to apply what you learn to develop messages that are just right for your organization and your campaign.
So, as you all probably know, Tia and I are here from Mission Minded. Mission Minded is a strategy and creative firm that helps good causes have greater impact. So we believe the organizations that make our world better need to be unapologetically bold. So every day we ask one simple question: what if? We find the opportunities for you to break the mold and to fire up your supporters, because when your community is united by magnetic ideas, they're going to stop at nothing to help you achieve extraordinary results. And that's what gets us fired up every day as well. So I'm delighted to be presenting here today with my colleague Tia, who is a brilliant strategist and writer who's been hard at work on some projects lately for National Federation of the Blind, and just recently wrapped up some campaign work on behalf of the University of British Columbia and on behalf of Wesleyan University. And so I'm bringing a lot of the insights from those projects and that work into our conversation today.
And I'm excited to be here with you, Zach. Zach is one of our founding partners and our creative director, and he's recently led the charge on some fundraising campaign strategies and messages for the Roche Trust, for the Kavli Institute for Particle Astrophysics and Cosmology, that's a mouthful, and Foothills Art Center. And then we also have Frida here from Mission Minded, and she'll be in the chat. So if you have any technology or Zoom issues, please feel free to message her there.
And we are watching that chat, and we welcome your questions and conversation as we go through this today. And if we miss that question, Frida will make sure that we see it and we come back to it. We're going to be talking about fundraising messages, and one of the things that we know is you've likely already done some of this work. Many of you attending this session, there's a good chance that you're already in a capital campaign, you're directing an annual fund, or some other type of fundraising initiative. And so you've probably already identified the need your organization has. You may have already set some campaign goals. Perhaps you did this with a campaign consultant and did this together. And oftentimes what we've seen is that campaigns stop at those two things: that you've identified your need, you've identified your financial goals, and then you begin writing a case for support with just those two things in mind to guide you. And what we know is that those things are great, but there's even more to have a successful fundraising campaign. You may have also done some of these things. You may have renderings of a new building or a facility that you're going to build. You may have already booked a few major gifts. Congratulations if you have. You've probably already drafted some sort of case statement for your feasibility study. If you've done this much, you're in a great position, but you're still missing some critical ingredients. And we want to talk about those ingredients to your fundraising success. And that is the persuasion, the emotion, the storytelling that's going to help inspire your donors to give. So you've done some of those things. Congratulations. Now what? And that's what we're going to talk about today. What are those next steps? How do we build an even stronger case for your campaign? And by the way, you may not have those things. You may be very much at the beginning of this. You may be just thinking broadly about fundraising. And if that's the case, this is all still applicable. And we encourage you to go through some of these same exercises. They're going to help you frame up an overall message, especially for some of the major donors that you're approaching on a regular basis. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk through a case study of one of the organizations that we recently partnered with, University of British Columbia. We're going to talk about how to develop your communication strategy around your campaign and how to identify target audiences, and then talk about the key elements of a successful campaign, your rationale, your emotion, and urgency. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what makes for a great campaign name before we get into really what the basis of great communications are for campaign fundraising.
Okay, so let's start. So we were hired by the University of British Columbia and their Faculty of Applied Science to work on a new capital campaign that they were launching. And so the University of British Columbia is a research university in Canada, and their Faculty of Applied Sciences are really known for their innovation and collaboration. And they're focused on bringing together engineers, planners, and architects so that they can work together once they get outside of the university. So UBC came to us and they had two main challenges here. So if you read the challenge, you'll see that they needed to raise money for a building. And that's typically something that's really hard for folks. Buildings are just buildings. They're physical objects. They're not as exciting of a concept as some other things that folks like to donate to. And then the second issue they had is they needed to raise money from a varied type of donors. And many of those donors thought that they had opposing interests. So they were having trouble finding a common message to reach everyone. So what they really needed here was they needed to unite their donors and inspire them to give to the vision of the building and not the actual building. So what is that building going to do? And that's a key difference that we like to call the difference between the feature and the benefit. So the feature is the building, and then the benefit is what is that building going to do, not only for UBC and its campus, but also for the world. And so we partnered with them to create a really compelling campaign strategy and really compelling messages. And then we collaborated on a visual identity, which came to life in the form of a brochure, a microsite, and a campaign video. And so through our strategy sessions and our discovery work, we landed on 5 donor types. And often in fundraising, when you think of donors, you think about how much they're going to give. You think this person is going to be my $1 million donor, and this person's going to be my $5 donor. But for when we do campaigns, we really think about what these folks value. We think about them not in terms of demographics, but in psychographics. And so for the University of British Columbia, we came up with these 5 audiences. We had Pablo Progress. And what motivated him to give is that he feels proud to know that UBC is leading the way for its graduates to share their collaborative intelligence in real world applications. So that's what's going to get him to give. And then we had entrepreneur Ellis. And Ellis loved this campaign and was motivated to give because they want to see their philanthropy in action. So they also, at the same time, want to facilitate a better relationship between their firm and the university. Then we had nostalgic Nate, and he felt really proud. He was actually an alum from UBC, and he wanted to know that he was able to provide more students with some of the opportunities that he had, and that he could lead the way in innovation for outside of the classroom. Then there was Benevolent Betsy, and she was motivated by the ideas that this new interdisciplinary way of teaching will improve not only the community, but the region and the world. And then finally, we had Winning William, and he was motivated by being seen as a driver in the transition to a cleaner and greener world. And it was really important for him to be recognized as one of the project's first and largest donors. So while we do have some demographic information like a faculty member or a corporate executive, what really mattered is what was going to motivate them to give, what was their relationship to UBC, and what their values were. So with that in place, we started to look at our case for support formula. And so this formula is comprised of 3 elements. It's the rationale, the rational reason why people should trust that their gift is going to do what UBC says it's going to do. So for them, their rationale was, for years, UBC and the Faculty of Applied Science has demonstrated their commitment to visionary models of sustainability and collaboration. This commitment is evident in the ways we teach, the partnerships we invest in, and the ways we design and use our school to push and prove what's possible. So that's the rational reason there. Then the second element is emotion. How do we get people to connect? How do we get them to feel something? And so the emotion for this campaign was contributing to the Applied One capital campaign makes me feel pivotal. The future of education and industry is a book not yet written. Through this campaign, I know that I'm helping the Faculty of Applied Science bring to life visionary, interdisciplinary means of tackling the world's most wicked problems together. And then last but not least, it's the urgency. Why now? Why do we need to do this? What will happen if we don't? And so the urgency for this campaign was the massive complex problems facing our world won't be solved by a few more architects, a few more engineers, or a few more planners working in silos. We're at a turning point where we must work collaboratively and inclusively to submit to a status quo of waning impact and relevancy. If it doesn't happen now, it will happen too late. And so you could just feel when those three things come together, you can feel that emotion. You could feel we have to do it now or it's going to happen too late. And then they gave you the rational reason for why you should put your trust in UBC. So with that strategy in place, the campaign needed a name. It needed something short, it needed something relevant, and it needed to be memorable and on brand. So this campaign we named Rewrite the Rules. And that was really on brand because we wanted to talk about the collaboration. We wanted to talk about moving away from the status quo. So we were rewriting the rules together. And that came to life in a number of visuals. You see here that one of the themes throughout is this handwritten font. And so that's supposed to be reminiscent of someone writing on a whiteboard, and it's sort of bringing together that collaboration that we're doing this now and at the same time. And then we had really actionable photography. Everyone's in movement. You see they're doing research, they're doing something, and they're working together on it. And then those themes persisted through a microsite and also through the brochure. So again, you see these annotations, you see crossing out. We're still writing the rules together. It's not something that's written yet. And then they wanted to share their vision in a really short elevator pitch, as you will. And so we call that the campaign belief message. So it's sharing the vision for what this campaign is going to do. And then it also alludes to the problem that the donor is going to help solve when they engage with this campaign. So for UBC, their belief message is, at the Faculty of Applied Science, we recognize that it's our time and our responsibility to change. The massive, complex problems our world faces won't be solved by a few more architects, engineers, or planners if they keep working on their own. There's a collaborative, audacious alternative to this academic status quo, and if it doesn't happen now, it will happen too late. Applied One is the launching point for this bold pivot. It's far more than a building. It will be a dynamic, inclusive laboratory in which students simultaneously apply perspectives of design, technology, and policy to enact the solution our world urgently needs. When you make Applied One a reality, you invest in a bold, optimistic future. And so you can see some of the elements coming together. You can see where we pulled in that rationale, that urgency, and that emotion. And then you can see it all in this really short elevator pitch format of the belief message.
So this may seem obvious, but I think it bears pointing out that great campaign materials and great creativity doesn't happen just because people decide, a couple of designers or whomever puts their heads together and says, let's make this happen. You really want to have a clear and well thought out strategy in order to create something that's creative, evocative, and moving and takes us into action. And so we're going to talk today about the formula for developing that strategy so that you can think about this with your own campaigns as well. And so when we think about building a great case, one of the first things I want to acknowledge is, for many of us, when we think of a case for support, we're thinking of a brochure, a written document that we leave behind with a major donor. And that definitely is a portion of our case. But we want you to think about your case as the bigger rationale for why someone would make a gift, why someone will join the campaign. It's not just the brochure. The case comes to life through key messages, through a brochure, through a video, a microsite, all sorts of other tools. And that's what ultimately will make a great case. And as Tia was telling us as we went through this, we've got to have all three of these different elements to make a great case. We need to have a really clear rationale. Here's what's going to happen with your gift if you make it. Here's the logical reason why you should make this gift and why you can trust us. We need to have a really clear emotion, a reason to give, and a feeling that's going to be evoked within us that moves us into action. Then there has to be some sort of now. It can't happen tomorrow. It has to happen today. Here's why it needs to happen today. You have to have all three of these elements in order to add up to a really successful case. One of the things that Tia was talking about a little bit as well is thinking about your donors through a different lens. I think many of us came up in the fundraising school of thought that creates a donor pyramid that has at the bottom those who might give the least, and we build up to those who might give the most. That's sort of the traditional way of thinking about a fundraising pyramid. But rather than using sort of superficial labels around income, we really want to encourage you instead to think about your donors in a different way, one that can be a lot more inclusive and deepen relationships for everybody involved. So if you think about your donors just through the lens of what they can give, you get that traditional model that's on the left. And then you start grouping donors in those ways, and you're putting all your rich people together and all your people who have lower ability to give together. That may not create a lot of connection. If you look at this, the values-based fundraising pyramid on the right, what you see is a grouping of folks based on what they truly care about and how that connects with the campaign and how that connects with your organization. So this creates a lot more affinity, a lot more connection. It actually helps to move people up in their giving levels as well because they're creating the connection. And the other thing is the folks at the top of that pyramid are also eager to talk to folks who may be lower on that pyramid but share their same passions and drives. So we really want to encourage you to think about creating not the traditional silos around your donors, but instead creating groupings that are based on affinities and creating stronger connections between them. There's a really strong blog post about this that my colleague Romaine wrote about a year ago. It's on our Mission Minded blog, so I encourage you to take a look at the Flip Your Donor Pyramid on its side for deeper engagement. Go Google that or search for it on our site and you'll find it. It's a great blog post. We'll also follow up after this session and give you that link. I also want to note that the Chronicle of Philanthropy, like 3 weeks ago, was talking about this exact same idea. So I think we're all ready to move from our traditional pyramid into a space that is based much more on values and affinity.
Also, Zach, like when you think about the traditional fundraising model, not to reiterate, you're pigeonholing people into a giving category. So if you talk to them like they can only give $5, they don't have a reason to want to give more. But when you talk to them about their values, they're much more likely to reach in and give an extra $10 or so.
Thank you. Appreciate that too.
Okay, so I did promise that this was interactive. And so I want us to take some time and think about your top 3 donor profiles. And once you've thought about them, I want you to take your top one and answer these questions. We want to get to know that donor a little bit better because we can't understand their values if we don't know who they are. So once you pick your donor, we want you to answer the following questions. What matters to them? What concerns keep them up at night? How does donating to your organization make them feel? What do you want from them? And what do they want from you? And then what must they understand about your fundraising campaign for them to see the intersection of their values and your goals? So I think we'll take 2 minutes. 2 minutes sounds good to think about one of your donors and answer a couple of questions about them.
I feel like I want to sing while you all are doing that, but that would probably be bad, distracting. But just, yeah, go ahead. Think about that donor. Name them if that helps you. Put somebody, really in your mind and bring that person to life and answer those questions. When you think back to the examples that Tia was sharing before about UBC, that's exactly the process that we went through, both with our client and then on our own afterwards, to really think deeply about what are those concerns and what does keep them up at night? How do they feel in relation to the organization? And George, we will be following up with several great resources to help you in your work, as well as a video, the recording of this session, so you can come back and reflect on the whole thing if you'd like. And I think some of you put a question into the question section as well. Thank you for that. And it was, can you give examples of the value and the affinity that an organization might have? And so, Tia, I'm wondering if there's one that comes right to your mind. And if not, I'll offer one up.
Did you get one before my thinking face?
So when we think about values an organization might have, it might be a value around lift our entire community up, right? That might be a way of stating a value. And I'm going to say one of the things we believe strongly at Mission Minded is we don't want to just say inclusivity is a value, because if it's not actionable, if we haven't taken it and put it into language that our stakeholders can grasp onto, they're not likely to take action with it. So to lift our entire community up might be one of the values of an organization. And so then you're finding those that share that value, that also want to really lift up our entire community and feel included as a part of that. And you're creating connection around that shared value.
I think our 2 minutes is up.
I think so.
We could have answered that question now. So how that comes together, how does your donor profile come together? So we'll take entrepreneur Ellis, for example, from UBC. And so what concerns keep them up at night? Well, they struggle with that with the environmental impact of mining, but they understand that a green future really depends on that. So what matters most to them? The diversity of thought that's essential to moving the industry forward. And what does Ellis want from us being UBC in this example? And they want the opportunity to see their philanthropy in action while also facilitating a better relationship between their firm and the university. And then what does UBC want from Ellis? And they want them to show their peers that they can be successful while also blazing new trails toward a greener future. And so one thing that we like to say is that sometimes the motivations of a donor are a little selfish, and that's fine. They don't have to be this super benevolent person. Like they are who they are, and we want to align with their values and where those values align with the organization.
And I think, Tia, what you just said is a really important point, where those values align with the organization. So we're not going to give up our organizational values just to chase money. We want to make sure that we're really clear about who we are and what we stand for, and where is their alignment with someone else who's interested in our organization, even if it also might include some self-interested reasons for supporting us.
I do see a chat. Amanda asked, how do you propose that we gather this information from thousands of donors? Surveys typically don't have a good response with 3 staff, and it's difficult to have one-on-one conversations. Zach, do you want to take that one?
I mean, it is difficult, but I would say we're big believers in qualitative research. And I would say that, having, say, a dozen, maybe 2 dozen conversations with some of your key stakeholders, those who you think really are most sort of in alignment with the organization, most like those that you think are likely to continue to support you, can yield a lot of really interesting and rich results. So imagine, if we're doing 12 to 15, 30-minute conversations, yeah, that's going to take some time out of a couple of days, but the richness of what that yields is really powerful and really helps you to gain the insights that we're talking about here.
Yeah, those one-on-one conversations, you hear a lot of things that you maybe didn't expect, or you get an aha moment out of them. And so while you can't reach everyone, that's totally fine, but you'll start to see patterns, and those are the patterns that you want to pick out and when you start to think about values and alignment.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how the campaign then comes to life through the formula.
Yeah. So we talked about what's the rational reason to give, right? Why should your donors trust what you say you're going to do? How can they rationalize that? How can you demonstrate that they should trust you with your donation? So our next exercise is take 30 seconds to think about this stakeholder will trust this campaign to succeed because, and then fill in the blank.
And while you're doing that, I'll just say, we know that we're not giving you a ton of time to do these exercises, but we want to pack as much as we can into this hour with you. And so you have this exercise, you can continue to do it on your own after this session is over. And then bring some of that to the session that we've offered, the one-on-one session after this.
Okay, your 30 seconds is up.
All right. So then that's going to take us to that next level. So if we've talked about the rational reason to give, we also need to talk a little bit about what's the emotion that's behind someone wanting to give. And it's going to be different for different people. But I think what's really important here is this quote from Donald Kanye, where he says, the essential difference between emotion and reason is that emotion leads to action while reason leads to conclusions. And this is really important for all of us who are in the fundraising business, because we need to motivate people to action. It's easier to hide behind rational thought. It's easier to hide in that space where we're just speaking to someone's neocortex and we're saying, hey, here's a lot of logic and here's why you should care. But people only care if you tap into the emotional part of the brain, that sort of that deep limbic system part of their brain, the fight or flight that causes us to do something. And we get to that part of the brain by activating emotions. Now, I think many of us were taught like there's one emotion, it's pathos, and we're trying to make people cry 3 times. And yes, pathos is a really powerful emotion. It motivates people to act, but it's not the only emotion out there. And so when we think about some of the different reasons people might give, it might be because they're inspired, they're angry, they are feeling hopeful, or they're feeling connected. And all of those different feelings, we want to make sure that we're activating, tapping into in appropriate ways for the right audiences, so that then we can come in with the rational reasons and say, yes, we've given you a reason to pay attention, and now you want to go do something. You know, I recently heard someone say that we retain information that we think is essential to our survival, and we don't listen to the stuff that we don't think is really all that important. So in order for people to really pay attention and listen, we've got to make sure that we're tapping into one level of their survival instinct, whether it's that they think that they're going to have a deeper connection in their community, or that the people around them are going to thrive and therefore they will thrive. All of those things help others to feel something and then therefore do something. So we want to ask you again, we're going to give you, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to say 60 seconds, but we want to ask you
You're
to
being
think for a moment. Yeah, I know. But we want you to think for a second about the emotional reason why someone's going to care about your campaign. What do we want them to feel? What do they want to feel in order to feel connected to your campaign? What's the underlying emotion that we're trying to tap into? Take a second, see if you can fill in the blank there. And then
remember,
challenge yourself. Yeah, I was going to say, then challenge yourself. If there's an emotion, is there a deeper feeling behind that? And is there something even deeper behind that? What were you going to say, Tia?
I was going to say, like with UBC, their emotion was pivotal. So it wasn't something like, oh, I'm going to cry about this, but they wanted to feel like they were taking an action. They wanted to feel pivotal. So it doesn't need to be, oh, I feel so bad, I need to donate, like you were saying.
And then the last thing we want to do, I don't know if I gave a minute or not. I wasn't actually keeping
You didn't.
track.
I was keeping track.
Oh, okay. I'll give
You
a few
had
more
40
seconds.
seconds.
All right, I'll give people a moment more.
Okay, now.
All right. Well, then the last thing we want to ask you to think about is the urgency. And why now? Why should people want to take action in this moment? And so we're going to ask you to answer this next question, which is, if we don't meet our campaign goals, what's going to happen? What's the urgency around this? What's going to happen in the world if this campaign doesn't take place? What's going to happen? Take a moment to fill in that blank. And again, push yourself. Like if you have an answer, maybe there's something even deeper. If we have a lot of time, we sometimes will say that, like, let's go ahead and do this 10 times and keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think there's a raised hand, but what I would love to ask you to do is just go ahead and throw that question into the chat, and we'll see it if you put it into the webinar chat. And then we want to push to the next level around this and ask the next question, which is, if we meet our campaign goals, what on the positive side, If we do meet our campaign goals, what will happen? And so now we're really thinking about benefit-driven answers. So it's not just we'll have a new building, but what happens as a result? And you might ask yourself, well, why is that important? Okay, well, why is that important? And well, why is that important? It's called a benefits ladder. And you keep climbing up that ladder to like the highest level of benefit that the new building might bring about. So if it's greater collaboration between students, well, why is that important? Well, because greater collaboration between students means better learning. Well, why is that important? Because better learning means that we're going to have smarter folks in the world. And why is that important? Because smarter folks in the world help to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And so we're really trying to ladder up to some of the biggest benefits.
Okay, we have a Q&A in here, Zach. Could/should the answers to these questions be different based on the donor persona?
The answer is yes. And so part of the challenge here is if you imagine sort of a bigger Venn diagram, maybe you have 3 or 4 different audiences, where's some of the overlap in the things that they care about and what motivates them? And it's also okay to think about these different value types as having different needs and structuring some of your messages to meet those different values where each of those donors might live. So a great case thinks about what's the overall center of that Venn diagram where people overlap, and then it might also develop some individual messages for different kinds of donors that are motivated by different things. So all of this then takes us to all of those pieces we were talking about. Rationale, emotion, urgency together is what makes that great case.
And so now let's talk about some traits of a good name. So when we think about campaigns, the name or the theme or the tagline is often the first thing that someone will interact with. And so that means that your campaign name really needs to excite or inspire your donors to, at the very least, want to know more. And so good names should be on brand for the organization. It shouldn't be something that someone sees and they can't connect it to your existing brand. It should be memorable. It should be easy to say. It should be visual. And then it also should be engaging, makes them think something or feel something or want to know more. And so we wanted to show you some examples of some good campaign names. And so this campaign name is This Is Our Day, and it's by San Francisco Day School. And it really brings us into the moment. It is our day, and it's inviting us to take an action. It's also a really cute play on the name of the school, San Francisco Day School. This is our day. And then this is All In from the Oakland Museum of California. It's short, it's sweet. Again, it's inviting. It's very inclusive for everyone, all in. For the Greater Glory, this was a Jesuit Catholic school, and it really hits home with that emotion and the nostalgia for their alums and parents. It's using their values, the same values that they use with their students in the campaign. So it's very on brand and reminiscent of what they stand for. And then this is Kavli Institute for Particle Astrophysics and Cosmology. You can tell that I like to say it just as much as Zach does. And their campaign name was The Limit Does Not Exist. It's very memorable. It's very catchy. It makes sense for them. And you could see how visually it comes to life. And it's something where you say, I want to know more about that.
Bonus points for anyone who can throw in the chat what movie uses
Yes.
that same line, because it served as an inspiration for us. Yeah, good job, Erica. I'm particularly proud of that. Yeah.
And then we have Dream With Us, the campaign for the LA Gay and Lesbian Center. Again, it's engaging. It's a command, dream with us, but it invites the donor in and it demands that they take an action.
So those are some of the ways to think about a great campaign name. We're going to shift into thinking about campaign messages. And one of the things we want to talk about is how can we make our campaign messages as inclusive as possible? These are some, just in some ways, message basics, but in doing them, you invite more people into the conversation. So we spent a lot of time thinking about the strategy. Now we're going to shift into some of the right words to bring that strategy to life. And one of the first obvious things around making your campaign as inclusive as possible is to use your name of your organization, your whole name, and say it out. we see this all the time. In fact, some of our clients may even sometimes still do this, but when you use an acronym in place of your whole name, you create a barrier for comprehension. It's a lot harder to understand what the ASPCA is and does if you've never heard the full name, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. ASPCA over time has come to mean something to many of us, but for those of us encountering it for the first time, it makes us feel silly and stupid that we don't know what it stands for, and we might not ask. And so we really want to encourage you, as you're thinking about going out into your campaign, to share as much as you possibly can, to be as explicit about who you are in the world. And this isn't just the name of the organization. It might also go for program names or to other initiatives. Every time you start to abbreviate and create three-letter acronyms and things like that, you are creating barriers for people to engage with you, to want to be a part of what you're doing. The next basic that we'll put out here, or ways of making your campaign more inclusive, is to focus on simplicity. And I say this not to say that you should dumb down your work. Most of us have, in our organizations, have come up with brilliant solutions that are highly sophisticated and took a whole lot of thinking in order for us to get there. And yet, if you're encountering someone, you might not have hours and hours to explain every bit of the brilliance that you've come up with. And so when you make your campaign simple and easy to understand, it makes it a lot easier for people to want to know more and to get deeper about it. And so if I talk to you about a housing solution, I could go into a whole lot of depth about how I've come up with this brilliant strategy for sharing housing, and maybe elders who are in their homes get to remain in their homes and then share their home. That's a lot of information. And instead, I might talk to you instead about there's just the simple truth. Like, we need to find solutions that help more people find housing in our community. And we also need to make sure that we find ways for elders to remain in their homes. What I just said is a pretty simple, straightforward way of explaining Allison Jakovsky's program. I know you're on the call today, Allison. And at the same time, there's a whole lot more depth that we can get into later. But if we want to be inclusive, we've got to make it easy to jump in. The next way that we can make our campaigns really inclusive is to avoid jargon. All of us are in industries that have insider language, insider jargon. There are a whole lot of folks on this call who are part of independent schools. And in the education world, education loves its jargon and loves to talk about, sort of use its more technical language. For your parent audience, for your funder audience, they may not know what you're talking about. And so really doing everything we can do to avoid that insider language, or if we feel like it's important to use that insider jargon, to then decode it, to talk about, well, here's what that really means. So I would welcome in the chat, if somebody wants to throw one of their favorite jargon terms that they hear inside of their organization, throw it in the chat, and we'll take a look at it for a second. What are some of the terms that you hear as part of your campaigns? A mirror window book. I love that you put that up there, Giselle, and I have no idea what that is. Peer assistance is another term that you might use all the time with your peers, but then when we start to talk to other donors, they aren't really going to know what that means. So it's really important to take those terms, to break them down, and to explain what that means to your broader community, even if it means you have to use more words to do so. Thank you for adding one more, Henry. I appreciate that. So the next thing that we might do is to avoid assumptions. So we don't want to assume a knowledge of the issue on the part of our audiences. We want to begin the story at the beginning. So I used Allison's program, Sunshine Home Services, as an example. And when we think about the assumption, not everyone realizes that we have a housing crisis right now, or that people who are older might have challenges remaining in their homes because of continuing to pay things like taxes and stuff like that. And so we want to make sure that we're explaining the context for the program and helping to bring people into the conversation. I see you have raised this question about what about those of us who are on a smaller scale? And I hope that for all of you here today, you can find ways to apply the lessons that we're talking about here. These things are true if you're a $5,000 program or a $50 million program. We want to welcome people in, and we want to find the language to do that. And so I know that some of you are working on smaller budgets, but that doesn't change the approach to how we think about inviting people into our conversations. One of the things we want to do in order to invite more people into the conversation is also to highlight benefits and not features. You've heard us talk about this several times already, to not just think about the building, but what happens as a result of the building. Another really simple way of thinking about this that I always, is sort of my go-to, is I think about if I came to you today and I encouraged you to buy a 6-foot long nylon cord that was double reinforced on both ends with a nickel-plated hook, no one is buying it. If I ask you instead to purchase a dog leash, because with it you'll have control of your dog in public and make sure your dog can't run away or get in a fight with another dog, those are the reasons you buy the leash. And so we buy the leash because of the benefit, not because of its features. And the same thing's true with our programs. We invite more people in when they can understand the benefits of what we're doing. Another thing that we want to remember as we think about being inclusive is don't try and say it all. There's no test at the end. And the donor to whom you're speaking does not need to know every single thing, every single part of your program in order to care or believe in you. They just need to understand some key, salient, most relevant points in order to want to be a part of the work that you're doing. So don't feel like you have to say everything. Get really clear about what it is you want to say. And one way to do that is the next slide, which really takes us into begin with your goal in mind. Get really
One
clear.
other thing, Zach, if you
Ahead,
really pique their interest, then they'll ask you. They'll want more details. They'll come to you for it. So don't feel like you just have to word vomit everything at one time. They will go to you and ask for those details if you really get into their values and understand them.
I love that, because we often think about, like, when we're creating a great case, the title of the campaign is like the welcome mat. And then we're inviting people in and we share our belief message. And that's the next level of inviting people in. And then we might get a chance to share some problems that exist or tell a story. And each one of those things are inviting people more and more into our campaign. So as you're thinking about your messaging, begin with your goal in mind. Be really clear about what it is you're asking people to do. And don't ask them to do 5 different things. Take one step and then take the next step and then take the next step. And then one more thing that we want to do from an inclusivity standpoint is point to the problem, not to the people. And so when we're thinking about the challenges that might exist in our community, those affected by a problem are not the problem themselves. And I think probably a lot of you have thought about asset-based framing and thinking about how we talk about in inviting others into to solve problems.
That's jargon. Zach, do you mind decoding that for us?
Yes, thank you. So asset-based framing is jargon. And when we think about, if I'm breaking down that term, what I mean by that is I want to focus on someone's strengths and the opportunities that lie before them, as opposed to sort of castigating them with negativity and all of the hurdles that they might face. And so we want to think about all of us coming from a place of strength. We might face challenges in our community, but we want to look at those challenges as things that we all solve together, as opposed to sort of painting someone with the brush of the problem that they're experiencing. Frida, thank you for adding that in the chat as well. To make our messages as inclusive as possible is to make our messages personal. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to use the word you in your messages. So if I talk in the third person and say, Sunshine Home Services solves housing problems in our community, that's true. And it's great that that's happening, but it doesn't engage our listener or our reader. And if I instead say, when you support Sunshine Home Services, you become part of solving the housing problem in our community, all of a sudden, you are a part of that solution. I've invited you in. Together, we're doing that work, and you're much more likely to want to take action. One more way that we can make our messaging inclusive is through repetition. We are bombarded with messages, and the number of messages that I saw as a kid every day doubled by the time Tia was watching some of the same afternoon after school programs. And it doubled again by the time my kids are watching those things. So we are seeing so many messages every single day. It's really hard to break through the noise. And one of the ways that we break through the noise is through repetition. And you've seen this. An advertiser like McDonald's will bombard you with a message, and you will hear something on the web, on the radio, on TV, in print, in a million different places, so that whether you like it or not, you're walking around going ba 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 ba. Our organizations, we don't have that kind of advertising budget or that kind of time, and that means we have to be a lot more efficient, and we have to be a lot more disciplined in using the same messages over and over a much longer period of time.
Okay, now let's get into the messages. I know we're excited about that. So here at Mission Minded, we like to think about messages in a different way. So usually when you're talking to someone, you start with the details. You talk about your day-to-day, you give them an overload, but people don't really care about the details yet. You have to first make them feel something. So we sort of flip that on its head with this messaging structure, where you'll start with the belief message, which is like an overview, elevator pitch of what this campaign is about. And then we start to go into, well, there's a problem. So once I've cooked you with the belief message, then we start talking about what the problem is that we're going to solve. And then we get into the impact. Let me give you an example of what this campaign can do. And then finally, and not before then, do you jump into the details. Again, we're talking, when you talk about the details, you're talking about the benefits and not just the features. So this is how it comes to life. For the campaign belief message, you want to give the high level information. You want to share your vision and build comprehension. And then you just want to slightly suggest the problem that the donors can solve. And I realized I used jargon when I said elevator pitch a couple of times, but an elevator pitch is like a 30-second overview. If you had 30 seconds to go from the bottom floor to the third floor with an executive, how would you sell yourself? How would you sell this campaign to them to make them want to give? So when to use it in an elevator, obviously, as I just mentioned, maybe you want to use it as a fundraising event, or when you're speaking directly to donors, or if you have a microsite for your campaign on the front page so people can easily see why you're doing this, what's it for. And so who's heard of Mad Libs here? Thanks, Zach. Do you want to explain what Mad Libs are?
Yeah, I love Mad Libs. Like, Mad Libs are fill in the blank stories where there's just sort of a gap for a noun or a verb or an article of speech, and that allows us to fill in the blanks and hilarity ensues.
And so we created our own type of Mad Libs for a belief message version. And so you can see that it starts with at your organization name, we believe blank. We've embarked on a campaign to blank for blank because blank. So that's how a Mad Libs works. And you're supposed to fill in the words there.
But honestly, that's a little hard to just think about it in that context. So we're going to give some examples so you can really think about it.
So there are really three key parts of your belief message. You start with believe, and that statement is meant to give that high level vision or that value statement. So we believe in X. And then concept number two is, so we've embarked on a campaign to do blank. What are you aiming to do? What were you setting out to do? And then concept three, where we talked about, because if we don't, there's a problem. Or if we do, something really, really great is going to happen. And so when you break it down into these three concepts, it's a little easier to comprehend how the belief message will come together. And so again, referring back to UBC's, University of British Columbia's campaign belief message, we can see that their first statement is, at the Faculty of Applied Science, we recognize that it's our time and our responsibility to change. So that's concept one. That's what they deeply believe. That's the value. And then the second concept is applied one is the launching point for this bold pivot. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to pivot and we're going to use applied one as that launching point. And then they close, when you make applied one a reality, you invest in a bold, optimistic future. So there are some details peppered into this belief message, but those are the three main concepts. So you could help see how they come together into one cohesive belief message. And so we have 2 minutes where we're going to ask you to write your own sample belief message. And I'm going to put up this Mad Libs structure here so you could just remember what we're asking you to do here.
We may also flip back and forth between this and the University of British Columbia example. But go ahead and think about this. At the name of your organization, what do you strongly believe? You've embarked on a campaign to do what? And I would encourage you that what is not about the feature, it's about the benefit. And then you're doing that because X and Y are going to happen. And then what's the end result of that investment? So see if you can fill in those blanks. It's okay to cheat a little bit, but really focus on those key things. We believe, so we've embarked on a campaign, because if we do, something great happens, or if we don't, we miss out on something.
And there are two questions. So the first one is, do you mean we should send fundraising letters several times? I think that's in regards to the repeat.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. What we were really trying to say is that you're going to send out a letter. You're going to show up in your, I don't know, online, in social media, in lots of different, in live and in person, and each of those different places, you need to be repeating the same message over and over, because those impressions will build up over time. But if I show up with one message in my newsletter, and then I'm saying something totally different in social media and something totally different in another space, people don't know who we are, and it starts to undermine our credibility.
That consistency is really key.
Yeah.
And then the second question, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on an organization using their tagline as a campaign name? Is it helpful for brand building, or do you recommend the campaign name being something distinct?
I mean, we've certainly seen it where the tagline becomes the campaign, or sort of vice versa, where the campaign then launches the new era, and that becomes the tagline thereafter. And so I think it certainly can work, but I wouldn't say it's just a given that your tagline can work as a campaign name. As a quick aside, because I know you all are still working on your belief message, one thing I'll say is, when you're writing a great tagline, leave off the ing. So when verbs get a gerund, when we add the ing onto it, all of a sudden the organization is taking care of it, as opposed to inviting others in. So if I say activating real world solutions for my tagline, you're going to look at it and go, great, I'm glad you're doing that. But if I say activate real world solutions, I'm now inviting you to be a part of it. It's really simple, but it's so much more powerful. So are there any other questions on things that we didn't get to today? We answered some questions as we were going along. We're really mindful of time. We're trying to end right on time with all of you, so we hope you appreciate that. But if there are other questions, oh, I see one. So Madeline has given us one. At Fair Food Network, we believe food can solve some of our biggest problems. We've embarked on a campaign to make food more accessible for families with low income across the country, because everyone deserves affordable access to healthy, affordable food. A lot of really great things in this, Madeline. One of the things I immediately want to know, though, is give me a little bit more how. That we believe food can answer some of our biggest problems. Can we get a little bit more specific about what kinds of problems, or how that might help to solve those problems? Embarked on a campaign to make food more accessible for families. That part makes sense. And then because everyone deserves access to healthy, affordable food, I might encourage you to push just a little bit more on the why. Why does everyone deserve access to it? What? And I agree with that statement. I think many people do, but I think you could push just a little bit harder on it.
What happens when they have that?
Exactly. We have one more here that I think we can take a look at, and that is, we believe that people change their beliefs about people who are different when they get to know them on a personal level and hear their stories. That is a really strong first sentence of this campaign message thing. And I would be eager to see how you build it out to then talk about the campaign and about what you're encouraging people to do. Well, we want to say we really appreciate you all taking an hour and being with us today. We hope that we helped to spark a little bit more energy into your campaigns and some new thinking. And anyone who wants to follow up with us, we really encourage you to do so. We're eager and excited to answer your questions. Tia, anything you want to say?
No, just thank you. This was really great. And I hope that you can take something back immediately and employ it in your messages.
All right. And to Amanda's question, will the slides be available? We will share out this entire recording, so you'll have access to it through that.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you all.